What if I told you that one of America's most beloved burger chains started as a single hot dog stand in New York City? A stand run by a man whose vision almost no one took seriously, and whose first customers were strangers who barely had enough money to eat. What if I told you that the story of Shake Shack isn't just about burgers, fries, and milkshakes? It's about obsession, resilience, and a relentless pursuit of excellence that transformed a small local dream into a billion-dollar empire. The founders didn't set out to build a global brand. They had no idea that decades later, millions of people would line up for hours just to taste their food. All they knew was that they wanted to make something that mattered. Something unforgettable. Something that made people smile, even when the world outside was harsh and unforgiving. The city was loud, chaotic, and unforgiving. Manhattan in the 1980s was a place of opportunity, but it was also a place where failure was brutal and visible. Every corner held a new competitor, every street a new challenge, and every day brought a fresh wave of judgment. John, one of the key figures behind this story, grew up watching small businesses try and fail. He watched families struggle to make ends meet and understood at a young age that only those willing to endure pain, humiliation, and setbacks could carve their place in the world. For him, hunger wasn't just a physical feeling. It was a metaphor for opportunity, for scarcity, for the raw drive that pushes someone beyond their comfort zone. And John was hungry not just for food, but for success, for respect, for a legacy that would outlast him. His first taste of the restaurant world came not from a fancy culinary school, but from cleaning tables, scrubbing floors, and taking orders at local diners. He observed everything, the way a smile could turn a bad day into a good one, how a delay could ruin a customer's mood, and how quality, consistency, and timing mattered more than any flashy marketing. Every failure he witnessed, every angry customer he met, every mistake he made, etched itself into his mind like a blueprint. These weren't just lessons in service. They were lessons in life, in human psychology, and in building trust. Slowly, John began to dream not of owning a chain, but of creating an experience, a place that people didn't just eat at, but remembered. In 1994, that dream took its first tangible form. The city offered a tiny kiosk in Madison Square Park, nothing more than a window and a small kitchen. But where others saw a shack, John saw a canvas. Investors were skeptical. The neighborhood was unpredictable. The rent was high and the permits were a nightmare. Many advised him to start small, to aim low, to settle for mediocrity. But John refused. He poured his savings, his energy, and countless sleepless nights into perfecting every single detail. The menu was simple, almost austere: burgers, fries, and shakes. But every ingredient, every patty, every bun was scrutinized with near-obsessive attention. He experimented endlessly, grilling, tasting, adjusting salt, testing buns, sampling sauces, and talking to every customer who would listen, learning what they liked and what they didn't. The first day was quiet, almost painfully slow. People walked past, curious but unsure. The cash register barely rang, and John felt the crushing weight of every penny he had invested. But then, he noticed something. The few who stopped, lingered. They smiled after the first bite. They asked questions. They came back the next day. And John realized that even in a city overflowing with options, there was a deep hunger for authenticity, for quality, for something that felt handcrafted and personal. He began to understand that success wasn't about competing with every other restaurant in Manhattan. It was about carving a niche so strong, so irresistible, that people would choose you not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Of course, challenges came fast. Equipment failed, deliveries were late, the weather was unpredictable, and every day felt like a battle. One rainy afternoon, the walk-in freezer broke down, threatened to ruin an entire week's worth of meat and buns. John stayed until midnight, salvaging what he could, learning quickly that in business, preparation is only half the battle, adaptability is everything. The city tested him relentlessly. Competitors mocked the small stand, calling it a fad, convinced it wouldn't last a year. Every failure, Every doubt cast by outsiders, every skeptical glance became fuel for his fire. He realized that persistence wasn't just about effort. It was about ignoring the noise and trusting your vision when everyone else tells you to quit. And then, word began to spread. Slowly at first, then in a surge that surprised even John. Locals praised the freshness, the juiciness, the perfect balance of flavors. People started lining up in the park, and soon what had been a modest kiosk became a magnet for the curious and the loyal alike. The media caught wind of it. Bloggers, journalists, and food critics visited, writing glowing reviews that painted Shake Shack as more than just a restaurant. It was a movement, a symbol of quality and dedication in a city where shortcuts and mediocrity were often rewarded. But with recognition came pressure. Every burger had to be perfect, every order flawless, every customer interaction meaningful. The stakes rose higher than ever, and John understood that one mistake could undo months of progress. Yet, beyond the business, there was a personal story of struggle and resilience. John worked tirelessly, often sleeping only a few hours a night, skipping family gatherings and sacrificing weekends. He questioned his choices constantly, wondering if the gamble would pay off or if he had made a fatal mistake. But every evening, when he walked through the park and saw someone enjoying a burger he had crafted, a smile breaking across their face, the exhaustion just melted away. Those moments became his anchor, the emotional validation that what he was doing mattered, not just in dollars, but in human experience. The stand grew into a small chain within New York City, each new location a test of whether the magic could be replicated. Some worked, some didn't, teaching John the brutal lesson that scaling was as much about psychology and operations as it was about the recipe. He began to understand the delicate balance between expansion and quality control, between ambition and patience. And it was here, in the relentless trial and error of those early years, that the foundations of Shake Shack's future empire were laid. Every decision about sourcing ingredients, training staff, designing interiors, and creating a brand ethos was informed by those early painstaking lessons. Then came the moment that would define everything. An unexpected investor meeting where the opportunity to expand nationally was presented. It was risky, too risky, most thought. Banks hesitated. Partners warned of failure. But John, shaped by years of overcoming small disasters, saw it as the ultimate chance to prove that a small hot dog stand could transform into a nationwide icon. He made the decision that would launch Shake Shack into a trajectory no one had anticipated, a trajectory that would see it dominate the premium fast casual market, attract global attention, and redefine what a burger chain could be. And yet, even in that moment of possibility, there was fear. Fear of overextending, fear of losing the intimate quality that had won hearts in Madison Square Park, fear that the very thing that made Shake Shack special could be diluted in the pursuit of scale. John understood that ambition alone wasn't enough. Precision, care, and vision had to accompany it. Every single burger, every shake, every fry would have to reflect the same obsession that had carried the first stand through its humble beginnings. As the city lights shimmered on the wet pavement outside the stand that had started it all, John looked at the queue of people waiting patiently, laughter and conversation floating through the air, and he realized something profound. Success wasn't about speed or luck or flashy marketing. It was about building something that people couldn't imagine living without, something that mattered enough that they would line up for it, travel for it, and remember it forever. And just as that realization settled, he received a call that would forever change the trajectory of Shake Shack. A national chain wanted to partner, to invest, to help bring his vision across the country. The terms were unclear, the risks enormous, but the choice was stark. Continue cautiously, keep it small, and risk mediocrity or embrace the unknown. Take the gamble and see if a small New York dream could truly conquer the nation. And that choice, that single decision, was about to launch Shake Shack into a story that would inspire millions, disrupt the fast casual world, and prove that even the smallest stand, run by a man with obsession and courage, could grow into a billion-dollar empire. The first years of Shake Shack's journey were far from easy. Even as lines grew at Madison Square Park, the reality behind the stand was filled with challenges that most outsiders never saw. Every morning, the founder arrived before the sun, inspecting supplies, checking ovens, and tasting every batch. He ensured every ingredient met the same obsessive standards that had carried him this far. But he understood that excellence is born in the unnoticed hours, in the sweat and repetition that no customer will ever see. Deliveries were late, equipment failed without warning, and trained staff were rare. The first attempt to open a second kiosk outside the park ended in near disaster. The ovens malfunctioned during the opening weekend, sending smoke through the tiny space and scaring away the initial customers. Reviews in the local papers were lukewarm, hinting at incompetence rather than promising innovation. The founder faced humiliation not just from the press, but from peers, who began to question whether a single stand's success could ever scale. The pressure was suffocating, the financial strain real, and the emotional toll immense. During this period, he faced betrayals that cut deeper than any logistical problem. Investors who had promised support disappeared when they realized profits would be slow. Partners argued over every decision, from bun suppliers to interior design, fracturing the trust that had once held the team together. Some employees left abruptly, frustrated with the high demands and long hours. Every setback felt personal. Every lost opportunity felt like a reflection of his own inadequacy. Nights were sleepless, filled with doubts that gnawed at the edge of his mind. He questioned whether he had overreached, whether ambition had blinded him, whether the small kiosk's magic was something that could never survive beyond its humble beginnings. Then came one of the most devastating blows of his early career. A planned expansion into a nearby neighborhood was abruptly canceled when a fire broke out in a supplier's warehouse, destroying thousands of dollars worth of ingredients. He had invested every possible cent he had saved from the first kiosk into preparing this new location. Suddenly, that investment vanished into smoke. The fire not only ruined the inventory but also delayed openings, eroded trust with new employees, and left the fledgling brand facing financial instability. Banks hesitated to extend lines of credit, and creditors began asking uncomfortable questions. The founder felt the weight of the world pressing down, threatening to crush everything he had built. Amid these failures, a sense of isolation settled in. The city that had once been a source of inspiration now felt like an arena of judgment. Friends were skeptical. Family members worried aloud that he was risking too much. Critics called the stand a fad, a novelty that would vanish once the city moved on. Each negative review, each disappointed customer, each minor operational failure magnified in his mind. There were nights when he stared at the empty park, wondering if it was all worth it, if the dream he had chased so relentlessly was nothing more than an illusion. He questioned his ability, his choices, his resilience. But it was in these darkest moments that a spark ignited. One evening, after a particularly disastrous day with burnt fries and unhappy customers, he stayed late in the empty park, staring at the dim lights of the kiosk. He realized that failure wasn't the end, it was a mirror showing him what needed to be fixed, what had been overlooked, what demanded attention. Instead of succumbing to despair, he began to study every mistake meticulously. He wrote notes, redrew workflows, revised staff training, and tested new suppliers. Every setback became data, every disappointment a lesson. The turning point came unexpectedly. A meeting with a skeptical investor, one who had previously questioned his vision, became the catalyst for a bold and risky strategy. The investor challenged him. If you want to grow beyond this park, you can't just copy what works here. You need innovation, you need scale, you need systems that survive mistakes and staff turnover. Can you do that? The question, simple as it seemed, struck him deeply. He had been protecting the product, the food, but not the process, not the team, not the systems. That realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. It was at this critical juncture that the founder made the decision that would define Shake Shack's future. He would innovate, but with a system so tight that failure would be minimized. He would preserve the magic of the original kiosk, but replicate it on a scale that no one believed possible. It was audacious, bordering on foolhardy, but for him it was the only path forward. To fund this expansion, he risked everything: personal savings, borrowed money, and every ounce of credibility he had left. Friends warned him, family hesitated, employees worried, but he knew that courage required moving forward despite fear. The next few months were a frenzy of preparation and refinement. He designed operational manuals, created training programs for staff that focused on both efficiency and empathy, tested logistics for multiple locations, and experimented with new technologies for quality control. Every detail was scrutinized: the temperature of the fries, the exact weight of the patties, the layout of the kitchens, the speed of service, even the music in the background to enhance the customer experience. Nothing was left to chance. Every failure he had experienced informed this new approach. Mistakes that had once threatened to destroy him were now guiding principles for building resilience and consistency. However, even as he meticulously planned, external threats emerged. Larger, established chains began to notice Shake Shack's growing popularity and dismissed it with mockery at first. Yet, as the lines grew longer and the social media buzz intensified, competitors shifted from dismissive to aggressive. Some tried to copy elements of the menu, others sought to undercut prices in nearby locations. The founder watched, learned, and adapted. He refused to engage in petty rivalry or price wars. And an emotional connection with every customer who walked through the doors. The process was grueling. There were weeks when multiple locations faced simultaneous operational failures. There were days when angry customers and negative reviews tested his patience and resolve. But he had learned the most valuable lesson of all. Every crisis was an opportunity in disguise. A burnt batch of fries became an experiment in frying techniques. A late delivery became a lesson in supply chain management. A miscommunication with staff became an improved training module. Slowly, meticulously, Shake Shack began to stabilize. Each success, however small, built confidence. Each failure became a stepping stone. By the time the first expanded location opened, the city was watching closely. Critics anticipated disaster. Loyal customers hoped for continuity. The opening day was tense, with the team working like a finely tuned machine under immense pressure. When the last order was served and the lines dispersed, a sense of accomplishment unlike any he had experienced settled over him. Not because of profits, not because of recognition, but because he had navigated failure, risk, and fear, and emerged intact. And yet, even in victory, he knew the road ahead was longer, steeper, and more unpredictable than he could imagine. He had faced near bankruptcy, operational disasters, and betrayal, but the most difficult tests were still to come. He realized that success wasn't just about surviving challenges. It was about preparing for challenges that didn't yet exist. That night, as he looked at the quiet streets of Manhattan, he felt both exhaustion and exhilaration. The failures had been brutal. The losses had cut deep. The doubts had gnawed relentlessly. But from the wreckage of mistakes, a new path had emerged, a path that could lead a small New York kiosk into the hearts and stomachs of millions. With that realization, he made the decision that would forever change Shake Shack's destiny, to move boldly into expansion. Trusting in the systems, principles, and passion that had carried him this far, even when the world doubted him. The next chapter would be one of audacious growth, clever strategy, and the first glimpses of global recognition. But it would not be easy. Every step forward required the courage to face fear and the humility to learn from failure. And as the city lights dimmed, one truth became undeniable: the failures, humiliation, and near-collapse moments were not just obstacles, they were the foundation. Without them, Shake Shack would never have been strong enough, smart enough, or resilient enough to become the iconic brand it was destined to be. Revolutionary idea: centralized quality control combined with decentralized care. He established a central kitchen to ensure every ingredient and every preparation was perfectly consistent. This meant the burgers, shakes, and fries would taste identical no matter where you were. But here's the genius part. He empowered each new location to build its own unique connection with its neighborhood. So, while the food was the same, each restaurant could add small touches to fit the local culture. It was a risky balancing act that could have failed spectacularly. But John's obsession with detail and his deep understanding of people made it work. Staff were trained to treat customers not as numbers, but as part of the Shake Shack family. And customers noticed. They returned. They talked. And slowly the word-of-mouth snowball began to build. Of course, success never comes without rivalry. Larger, established chains began to take notice, and they weren't happy. In subtle ways, they tried to undermine him. Competitors slashed their prices in nearby neighborhoods. They launched marketing campaigns that subtly mocked Shake Shack's boutique, high-quality feel. In some cases, they even copied parts of the menu. John could have responded with anger or retaliation, but he understood a crucial lesson. Real competition isn't about fighting back, it is about being better in ways they simply cannot replicate. So, he doubled down on quality. He started sourcing even more premium meats, experimenting with proprietary sauces, and perfecting the custard recipe for his shakes. Every innovation became a statement. Shake Shack wasn't just another burger chain, it was setting a new standard. The first major national expansion tested him like never before. Opening in cities across the United States, John faced challenges that made the early struggles in Madison Square Park look small. Supply chains were stretched to their absolute limit. Staff shortages threatened the quality of service. And cultural differences meant that what worked perfectly in New York didn't always connect with people elsewhere. Some of the new locations faltered at first. Customers complained about long waits or slight inconsistencies. Investors started to get nervous. But John's philosophy had been forged in the fires of failure: adapt, learn, and iterate relentlessly. He studied each setback, personally interviewed staff and customers, and implemented rapid solutions, never once compromising on his core principle. Every meal must delight, and every customer must feel valued. Then came the moment that would cement Shake Shack's status as a global phenomenon. A prominent food critic visited a newly opened location in Chicago. He wrote a glowing review that went beyond just the food. He highlighted the emotion behind it, the care, the human connection, the story embedded in every single burger. The review went viral. It brought national attention, attracted a flood of new investors, and created a surge of demand that even John hadn't anticipated. Lines stretched for blocks. Media coverage amplified the story. And overnight, the brand transformed from a regional favorite into a nationwide obsession. Global expansion soon followed. Shake Shack entered markets overseas, and each new country presented a unique set of challenges. Different local tastes, new cultural expectations, and complex regulatory hurdles. But John approached each new market with the same obsessive research he had used back in New York. He learned the local customs, sourced ingredients that met his incredibly high standards, and trained staff to uphold the brand's core values. The result was a chain that was somehow both familiar and local, completely authentic to its roots, yet adaptable enough to resonate with a global audience. As Shake Shack grew, John remained intimately involved in every aspect of the company. He would personally walk through each new location, tasting the burgers, speaking with the staff, and observing the customers. He refused to delegate the responsibility for quality, believing that the brand's reputation rested on the obsession of its leadership. He implemented training programs that emphasized storytelling. Employees weren't just taught how to cook or serve. They were taught why every single detail mattered. Customers started to notice the difference. A burger wasn't just food. It was an experience, crafted with genuine care and intention. The financial success mirrored this cultural impact. Revenues surged. Investors who once doubted him now clamored to get in on the action. Shake Shack became a case study in how dedication to quality, customer experience, and operational excellence could create a sustainable, profitable empire. Yet, John never allowed the numbers to overshadow the human story. He remained committed to maintaining the intimacy and authenticity of that original stand, perfectly balancing massive expansion with the values that had carried him through failure and doubt. Public recognition grew. Awards, interviews, and media appearances followed, but John treated fame as a tool, not a destination. He used the attention to reinforce the brand's philosophy, to communicate the importance of quality, and to inspire a new generation of entrepreneurs. Every headline became an opportunity to showcase not just the food, but the dedication, resilience, and heart that had built Shake Shack from the ground up. Even as a global brand, the challenges continued. Supply chain disruptions, staffing shortages, and occasional operational mishaps were constant reminders that no success is permanent. But by this time, John had transformed failure into a skill. Every setback was now a lesson. Every crisis was a chance to improve. The company culture reflected this resilience, with employees trained to adapt, innovate, and always care for the customer. By the end of this chapter, Shake Shack had become more than a burger chain. It had become a symbol. It represented the idea that even the smallest beginnings could grow into global influence. It proved that attention to detail could outweigh sheer scale, and that vision, paired with relentless execution, could overcome obstacles that once seemed insurmountable. John had transformed skepticism into respect, failure into learning, and a simple hot dog stand into a billion-dollar food empire. As John stood at a flagship location, watching a line of loyal customers stretch around the corner, he understood something profound. Success wasn't defined by profit margins or media accolades. It was defined by impact, by the moments of joy, the memories created, and the connection between the people who walked in hungry and the food that was crafted with so much care. That connection, that invisible thread of trust and delight, was the true victory. Even now, as Shake Shack opens its doors in new cities around the world, John Ye's thoughts remain focused on the next challenge: how to maintain the heart of the brand and how to foster that same emotional connection in every city, every culture, with every single customer. The empire had grown, but the soul of the original stand remained: the obsession with quality, the commitment to service, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. And as the sun set over another busy Shake Shack with laughter and conversation spilling into the streets, John realized that this moment, the long lines, the happy customers, the media attention, was just the beginning. There were more cities to conquer, more challenges to face, and more dreams to fulfill. The empire was alive, thriving, and still growing, but it was anchored in the lessons of every burnt fry, every late delivery, every skeptical critic, and every moment of fear that was overcome. Shake Shack had risen, not by chance, but by relentless dedication, courage, and the unwavering belief that even a small stand could change the world. Years had passed since the first lines formed in Madison Square Park, since that small kiosk, which had seemed so fragile, began to hint at greatness. Shake Shack was no longer just a local sensation. It had become a cultural icon, a symbol of what dedication, obsession, and courage could achieve. But for the founder, John, the numbers, the headlines, and the awards were never the ultimate measure of success. He had learned early on that true achievement is defined by the lives you touch, the communities you support, and the legacy you leave behind. As Shake Shack expanded globally, John began to focus on what comes after growth. He knew that a brand's success isn't permanent. Empires can crumble if the people, the values, and the systems that sustain them are neglected. So, he devoted himself to mentoring his team, instilling in them the principles that had guided him through both failure and triumph. These weren't just business tactics. They were life lessons. Attention to detail, empathy for customers, a relentless pursuit of quality, and courage in the face of uncertainty. This became the DNA of Shake Shack, encoded not just in training manuals, but in the culture itself. Every employee learned they were part of something bigger than themselves, that each action, no matter how small, could shape the experience of thousands. John also turned his attention to giving back. He understood that privilege and opportunity carry a heavy responsibility. Shake Shack began initiatives to support local communities, offering scholarships to underprivileged youth, funding culinary training programs, and investing in sustainable food practices. In neighborhoods where new locations opened, John personally oversaw community outreach. He wanted to ensure that the brand wasn't an outsider imposing itself, but a partner enriching the lives around it. Hospitals, schools, and local charities received support, not for publicity, but because John genuinely believed that a company's legacy is measured by the good it creates beyond its profits. But despite the global fame, John's personal life was far from easy. The relentless pace, the stress of scaling a business, and the constant weight of responsibility began to take a toll on his health. There were nights spent awake, worrying about supply chains, staff retention, and the quality of a single burger served thousands of miles away. Yet, even in these moments of vulnerability, he never lost sight of the principles that had guided him from the first burnt fry to the empire that now bore his fingerprints in every city. He learned to delegate without compromise, to trust without losing accountability, and to measure success not only by growth, but by the integrity of the brand. This is a crucial lesson for any entrepreneur. Scaling isn't just about getting bigger. It's about getting better at letting go while holding on to what matters most. Shake Shack's legacy became apparent not just in its profits or international expansion, but in the emotional connection it fostered. Families returned week after week, young couples made it a ritual, and tourists sought out the original kiosk like a pilgrimage of flavor and experience. The brand had become a part of people's lives, embedded in memory, emotion, and tradition. John watched this growth with a quiet satisfaction, understanding that creating something that could outlive its creator required not just ambition, but patience, foresight, and an unwavering commitment to values. At this stage, John also reflected deeply on the lessons of failure that had shaped him. He spoke openly with his team about mistakes, the near misses, and the disasters that had almost destroyed the brand in its infancy. He reminded them that fear isn't an enemy but a guide. He taught that humility is essential, and that resilience is forged only in the fire of adversity. His employees absorbed these lessons not as theory but as lived experience, applying them to every decision, every location, and every interaction with customers. Philanthropy became a cornerstone of John's vision for a lasting legacy. The Shake Shack Foundation began funding culinary education for youth from disadvantaged backgrounds, teaching not just cooking, but leadership, creativity, and the value of hard work. Hospitals received donations to improve nutritional options for patients, emphasizing the importance of quality food in our overall well-being. In cities where Shake Shack opened, community gardens and local food initiatives received support, reinforcing the idea that a restaurant can contribute meaningfully beyond its menu. John's philosophy was clear: wealth and success are instruments, not destinations. Their highest purpose is to create a positive, enduring impact on the world. Even as John aged, he remained intimately involved with the company, but he also knew the importance of preparing the next generation of leaders. He established mentorship programs, leadership workshops, and succession plans to ensure that Shake Shack's vision would continue long after his time. He emphasized the delicate balance between innovation and tradition, urging future leaders to respect the brand's roots while daring to push its boundaries. Legacy, John realized, isn't just about the empire one builds, but about the culture, the values, and the principles that survive beyond the founder. The health challenges he faced became a humbling reminder of mortality, but they also reinforced his urgency to leave something meaningful behind. Every visit to a new location, every interaction with a customer, every decision on philanthropy or expansion was infused with this intentionality. John knew that he could not live forever, but he could ensure that the impact of his work would. Shake Shack was no longer simply a chain, it was a living testament to resilience, vision, and the power of obsessively caring about people and product alike. In the end, the legacy of Shake Shack is not defined by the number of locations, the billions in revenue, or even the international acclaim. It is defined by the joy, the connection, and the inspiration it delivers daily. It's reflected in the employees who take pride in their work, in the families who share meals under its roof, and in the communities uplifted by its presence. John's story teaches us that true success is measured not in numbers, but in the lives touched, the culture built, and the values preserved. And as the sun sets on yet another bustling location, with customers laughing and sharing moments over burgers and shakes, John's vision is crystal clear. Success is not a destination, it is a responsibility. A responsibility to care relentlessly, to innovate without compromise, to honor every challenge faced along the way, and to leave the world a little bit better than you found it. If you take one lesson from John's journey, let it be this: start small, dream audaciously, embrace failure as your greatest teacher, and commit to a vision so strong that it inspires everyone who touches it. No matter how small your beginnings, no matter how many obstacles arise, the combination of perseverance, purpose, and heart can turn even a single kiosk into a global legacy. And now, for those watching this story, I want you to ask yourself, are you ready to take your vision, face your failures, and commit to leaving a mark that outlives you? The next Shake Shack could be yours. Start today, work relentlessly, and build something that will make the world pause, smile, and never forget your name. Thanks for watching. If this story inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe for more content that fuels your ambition. We'll see you in the next one.